Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to this interview for the mini series of the Voices of the Divine Feminine, recorded and hosted by Radhaa's Publishing House. And I am your host, Kara. And today I have the honor and pleasure of sitting down with Yvonne Irene. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm just going to take a moment just to read your bio so that the viewers know a little bit more of who you are.
Amazing.
Yvonne Irene Ulloa is an intuitive spiritual astrologer, End of sentence. Astrology has always been a passion and interest of hers since she was a little girl. She would watch Primer Impacto and wait for Walter Mercado to give the daily astrological report. As she got older, her interest in astrology grew. She would study astrology in her free time by reading books and practicing applying what she had learned on her own chart. Later, she began to study astrology more in depth with teachers and with mentors. And she began to practice reading other people's birth charts for 2 years to hone in on her craft. She uses astrology to help people uncover the planetary energetics that make up their unique personality, purpose, karmic mission, and pattern. She helps people discover their gifts and embody their soul's cosmic blueprint through astrology and coaching. She utilizes astrology, embodiment, somatic practice, EFT tapping, and soul purpose and business coaching to help clients embody their unique soul's purpose. That sounds amazing. So before we get into the book, do you mind just sharing a little bit about your passion about astrology, just since we tapped into that?
Yeah, of course. So, like I was mentioned, astrology was an interest of mine since I was a little girl. I grew up in a Spanish speaking household, so most of our channels were the Spanish language ones. And the one show that caught my attention, which is weird for like a child to say, it was a news program called Primer Impacto, which means first impact. And the only part that I liked and I resonated with and would wait in like complete and total excitement for was Walter Mercado's astrology reports. And I was not expecting that. My parents would watch that program, and then I saw him and he came on with his like elegant regal robes and started giving the daily astrological reports for all the signs, and he would be on the news every single day throughout my childhood. And the moment when I found out, okay, being born on May 8th means that I'm a Taurus, I would just sit there and I'd be like, all right, Walter, like, please tell me what is happening for Taurus. I want to know. And as I learned, my dad is an Aries, my mom is an Aquarius, my brother is a Leo, I would wait and I would sit and I'd see what's happening for them too, because I was such a very curious child. So I always wanted to know what everyone's sign was and figure out what was happening with them.
I love that. That is so that's so cute in so many perspectives and also super relatable. For myself, it wasn't through news, but it was through magazines. I wouldn't give a about any of the rest of the magazine. It would just flip through to what the astrology was. And I love that. And I love how there was that curiosity that's very in my teaching and understandings of astrology. I work with the tropical and sidereal charts. That's very earthy and Taurosy to also make sure to understand a little bit more about the people around you too. So I love that Walter Mercado was able to give you that inspiration, and I wonder if he knows that.
Yeah, it was so amazing. That was like one of my things too. And similar with you, I loved the horoscopes in the magazines too. I was similar. I didn't care what the articles were, what was happening with the celebrities. I would immediately always turn to that section and just see what it said for my sign. And as I started to go into school, when I started kindergarten and learning to speak the English language, I would make friends and then I would ask them like what their birthdays are. And we would talk about like their zodiac signs too.
I love that. I love that so much. So we're going to start to switch a little bit more into the book, but thank you so much for sharing. And if astrology does come up again throughout the interview, please feel free to share about it because it's such a beautiful thing, and your passion resonates through very loudly.
Oh, thank you so much. It's definitely a part of my chapter for sure.
Amazing. So, do you mind telling us a little bit about your chapter along the lines of what goddess you ended up connecting with and what the creative process was in the creation of your chapter?
Yeah, absolutely. So the goddess that I connected with was Kuan Yin, and I did not learn about her until I was in this program that one of my astrology mentors was teaching. Her name is Sarah Thomas. She's at She Sees the Stars. And it was about healing trauma through astrology. And during one of the sessions, it was a heart healing session. We had this beautiful woman named Nicola come and do a heart healing session for us. And at the end, she pulled a tarot card with the goddesses for all of us. And for me, she pulled out Kuan Yin and she's like, oh my gosh, like this makes so much sense when I connected with your energy. And for me, I had never heard of Kuan Yin before, did not know who that was. So she said, I will send everyone pictures of their tarot cards so you guys can go on and look up the goddess. And when I looked her up and found out that she was connected with self compassion, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And when I was approached about this opportunity to be in this book with Radha, that was the first goddess that immediately came to mind and connected with my own story and my own journey. So I knew I had to write about her because it was so beautiful to feel that energy was always there with me, even before Nicola pulled that card for me and I knew who Kuan Yin was.
I love that. Isn't it so beautiful how we can have these guides, be it guides, spirit guides, whatever we want to call, where we can feel them beforehand, and then the soul part of us knows that there's that connection, but then we'll say the human part and the 3D part sometimes needs that visual or needs that reassurance. And I love that it just connected it for you and brought her more into your life. And do you mind sharing a little bit about what it was that you shared about her and what your connection was within the book?
Absolutely. So, with her in my book chapter, I talk about my journey. And my journey in particular is one of growing up in the United States to immigrants from Latin American countries. My mom is from Mexico and my dad is from Honduras. So, when you grow up with immigrant parents, they're moving from their own countries to come and give you a better life in a new country. And they work so hard, they sacrifice so much so you can have more and better than what they had. So for me and my journey, my parents would always say things like, we don't have a lot of money, so we're not going to be able to give you a financial legacy behind to like help you out, but what we can do is support you and allow you to have education and opportunity. So my parents had spent most of the time seeing what success looked like in the US, which for many people it was doing really well in school, studying, going to college, getting those secure stable jobs, the ones that you mostly hear a lot of immigrant children say are stereotypically brought about by parents like doctors, nurses, lawyers, and whatnot. So I grew up really heavily with hearing those messages all the time and hearing things like, you're here because you have so much more opportunity. There's free public education, there's more financial assistance from the government to go to school to have these opportunities. So I kind of grew up just living that stereotypical role of the perfect immigrant daughter. So I just did what I thought was appropriate and what I was supposed to do. And that led me to going into a master's program in marriage and family therapy and school counseling. And I always knew I wanted to help people, and that just seemed like what made the absolute most sense. So after graduating, I worked as a couple years, about 3 years, as a school counselor at an elementary school. So I was working with young kids and teaching them social emotional learning and lessons, facilitating groups, doing one-to-one check-ins, teaching classroom guidance lessons. And I just remember, at the end of my first year, I just felt like, okay, like all of the excitement has left the building for me. I've done everything I can with this career path, and I don't understand why I'm feeling miserable and sad. And that was when I started to feel that need and that desire to find work that was connected more to my purpose. And that made me feel good. That wasn't something that I was feeling in my job at the time. I was feeling so burned out. I was feeling just so confused because, to everyone else, it looked like everything was perfect. I worked at one of the best paid school districts in the state of Washington. I was making a lot more money than a lot of my peers who graduated with me from my university. My parents were so happy for me. I had a job with secure benefits, retirement, and everything. And I was just miserable.
And from there, what allowed you personally and possibly on the exterior to find that bravery to go, this isn't where I'm meant to be, and to transition a little bit more into the unknown of astrology, especially with having we'll say the pressure that was put on by your parents of going in a specific direction? How did you find that courage within to be able to transition over?
Yeah. So during my last year, when it was my third year as a school counselor, I just started to really acknowledge this, that I was not happy, and trying to figure out what to do. And for me, one of the biggest hurdles to jump over wasn't telling my principal that I didn't want to renew my contract or sending a letter of resignation to the district. I was fully prepared to do that. It was telling my parents that I did not want to do this and I wanted to kind of figure things out and pursue my own path. And that was when I started to feel more of that energy of Kuan Yin come through, because I realized how hard I had been on myself with, these are expectations that my parents weren't even really forcing onto me or putting onto me. It was more just things that I put on myself. And I know you said, a little bit about astrology. Like, I'm a Taurus sun in the sixth house. So I have like a lot of Virgo tendencies. So I can be very hard and nitpicky on myself, project things where I'm like, I need to do this, I need to do this. And if it's not perfect, I cannot succeed and, shine as I'm meant to. So that was that moment where I started to turn even deeper again to astrology and look at my chart, because I had always been fascinated, but I kind of fell off the astrology wagon when I started college because no one was interested. And then even when I was in my master's program, for example, a lot of people were like, hey, we're in a clinical therapy program. Like, we do talk therapy. And for me, I was like, oh, I think like incorporating yoga with the therapy or breath work or meditation would be so cool. And I thought astrology too, but I didn't want to say that because I saw how people reacted to, yoga, meditation, and breath work, and were kind of being judgmental and not the kindest to me. So I was like, okay, I better keep my mouth absolutely shut and glued when it comes to the astrology and therapy, because these people are then going to definitely like burn me at the stake for that. So that was when I started to get back into it. And I looked at my chart and I was like, oh man, I'm being so harsh on myself, so critical on myself. And I started to look into it more objectively and dive in even deeper into my own astrology learning and getting books, learning more. And as I had that, I was like, oh gosh, like I really need to have more self-compassion for myself. That's a big part of my journey that I see in my chart. So I just decided that I would bite the bullet and tell my parents that I was not going to renew my contract. And I had the most shocking, absolutely unexpected outcome happen when I was talking with my dad first. And he said, that's fine. He's like, I'll help you do whatever it is that you want to do and like support you. I just want you to be happy. I don't want you to be miserable. And I remember breaking down into tears and crying because I'm a Pisces moon, so I'm very sensitive. So I broke down into tears and was crying, absolutely shocked at this outcome. I had been preparing myself for the absolute worst, where I was like, oh gosh, like, what if my parents disown me or they hate me? So I was not prepared for being received with unconditional love.
That's so beautiful. I can relate in my own experience of when there's that fear of telling your parents something, and the Virgo part of us, I'm a stellium Virgo in pretty much any system you look at. I just have stellium Virgo everywhere. So I can totally relate to the being really, really, really hard on ourselves. And with the Virgo aspect, a lot of the times we like to look at the whole pie and to find every piece of it so we know every outcome from A to Z. But what will happen a lot of the times with Virgo energy is if we don't see it coming, then all of a sudden it's like, wait, what? So, one, I acknowledge you for your bravery of telling your parents, because that is one of the scariest things that we can do. Two, for having told your parents to one, be able to unlock that fear within, and then to also just unlock the ability in the future to know that you can face anything because you've already done one of the scariest things to you in this lifetime. So I acknowledge you and I see you in that. And I also celebrate you for going towards what felt right for you. And before we transition a little bit more into a different question, just to elaborate a little bit more, how has your journey with astrology been now that you've been a little bit more open about it with everybody around you and you're able to own your full self and what feels right? So how does that feel and how has that looked for you now?
Oh, it looks so different now. Because when I was younger, I would read, like the little horoscopes in the magazine, and everyone just thought, oh, that's cute. That's what little girls do. And even when I was like a teen, it was like, that's like obviously one of the favorite parts for teenage girls in those magazines. So it was just seen as like cute and appropriate. But it wasn't until I started to go deeper. I remember one day writing on the whiteboard at my old school counseling job, and I wrote, what is your sun, your moon, and your rising sign? And I was just so curious because I wanted to know what was happening with the teachers. Nobody knew I wrote it because I disguised my handwriting and tried to be discreet. And I heard like some of the feedback in the room where we're like, I don't even know what the hell that is. That's weird. Who would write that? And I was like, okay, I'm definitely not gonna own that up and claim it. So it's so different when I think of myself from that space. And, I was working in that job space from 2018 to about 2022. So when I look at myself now, once I started to dive deeper into astrology, I would meet people and I would tell them, oh, yeah, I study astrology. I think it's so fun. And I would go and read everyone's chart cold that I met. And, the feedback I always consistently received was, I feel like you're seeing my soul and you're giving me the complete and total permission to be myself. And I see it in my chart. And that was so beautiful for me because I never volunteered to read anyone's chart. When I was learning on my own, I would only look at my chart. I would look at like my family's chart and try to understand them more and do the celebrity charts, but I would never go up to anyone and be like, Carrie, I do astrology. Do you mind sharing your birth information with me? And I can pull up your chart and we can have a conversation. Like, I would have never done that. And that was a big part of that journey for me, where I was practicing and reading and just telling people and getting into that space of owning it without the fear. And that's really allowed me to go out there and create my own business and do this for a living and get to support people in a way that feels absolutely like heart opening for me. And it just makes me feel so happy that people feel so validated and so seen after reading.
That's so beautiful. And thank you for seeing people and for bringing them closer to their purpose. Because by doing it for you, you're now allowing other people to be a little bit closer. So, the beauty of following our own path.
Absolutely.
And how would you say that your connection to the goddess and just feminine energy in general has shifted and changed since the book has been released?
Oh my goodness. Since the book has released, I feel like my relationship with the goddess and the feminine has just exponentially grown in comparison. Because at the time when I was um, doing the whole process with Radha and the team behind the scenes of, the incubators and then getting everything ready and then having the book come out, I was at the beginning of my own healing journey. I didn't have the time to really dedicate to that and going into myself until 2022 began. And then that was around the time too where the book opportunity approached. So I was at the early, very beginning stages. And for me, when I look at the elements that make up my own chart, I have so much earth and I have so much water. And as you know, in astrology, the earth and the water represent the feminine, and the air and the fire represent the yang, the masculine energy. So I have a lot more feminine energy, but because of how we're conditioned in society with you got to work, you got to be doing, 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 and pushing yourself to the point of burnout. And, we live in a society where being burnt out and sick and miserable is something that people wear as a badge of honor in a sense from that perspective. So I was deeply ingrained in that system from being in, like the public education system, going through college, and then working in the education system myself. So when I was starting, I was really healing from burnout. That was the first thing that I was really working on. And I had the full pendulum swim where you go from I'm super hardcore in the masculine to then being super hardcore in the feminine. And I wasn't really experiencing much needle moving. I was kind of floating around. And it wasn't until about like a year later, once 2023 started to go in, and I decided, okay, I really want to do a business. I really want to, share these gifts of what I've learned, what I've ingrained in myself. That was when I hit the middle of the pendulum and found that happy balance between the masculine and the feminine, which was so big for me because I was someone who was so in the masculine for so long and deeply neglected the feminine. And now I'm much more comfortable with that. And I've noticed too, and maybe you have too with astrology, that a lot of us are growing into our sun signs. And I feel that for me, when I was younger, I did not resonate with being a Taurus sun. I thought it was lame. I was like, these Tauruses are just stubborn. They're, stuck in the sameness. They don't want to have change. That doesn't sound like me at all. And it wasn't until I got older and I started to learn more about the higher archetypes connected with Taurus, like being connected with the feminine, with the embodiment, being connected with the senses. And that's when I started to understand that connection with the feminine and feel it so much more. So I'm so grateful to be in that kind of space and really honoring that energy because my soul picked being a Taurus sun and it wants me to shine through that avenue.
So beautifully said. There's so many beautiful nuggets of knowledge that you just said in that clip. Thank you for honoring the the sun sign within you, and exactly as you said, your soul's decision to be a sun Taurus. Because I also can relate in that in tropical I'm a sun Virgo, a moon Cancer, and a rising Capricorn, and I have not related to being a Virgo as well for a lot of my life. And I also feel too that it has to do with the world that we live in too. We've lived in a very patriarchal system for several centuries, and there's a whole history around just the quieting of the feminine. And right now we're in a beautiful space where there's so many of us, especially who are in within a feminine vessel, who are awakening and realizing that the system is not conducive to even just our moon cycles, and the ability, most women don't take that time to take a week to chill and to be, because it's not taught that that's something that we should do. Whereas if you look at our ancestors and not far back, that's exactly what they would do. They would go into red tents and into bleed tents together and just be. And so thank you for honoring what your soul is asking you to do, and for following that calling to also look into the higher Taurus energy, because I have a Taurus father and it took me a moment to understand the higher Taurus energy, and it's a beautiful, beautiful energy.
Yeah, I totally get that. That's one of the things that always shocks clients when I tell them, there is no bad planet, there is no good planet, there's no bad sign, there's no good sign. They all have their shadows and they all have their higher energy. And it's up to you with your own free will where you're going to go when it comes to that energy.
Mhm.
And that always just blows their mind.
I love that. And that's exactly it. Exactly. And we also, with the world that we live in too, with having social media, where there is a lot of, we'll say, shitting on certain signs based on different stereotypes, it can be really challenging, especially if that's where you're learning from, is from
Mm-hmm.
those videos. Then you're not seeing the higher perspective, which is so wonderful in all of the signs. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. I agree. I feel like that's the unfortunate thing that I've heard from many of my own friends and clients, that when they're trying to find very basic information, they want to learn how to read charts, they want to learn how to do this. And, unfortunately, a lot of them say the things that are the easiest to understand are the memes. And, the memes are just poking fun at the shadows of all the signs. So, that's why when I meet people and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm a Scorpio, I'm toxic. I'm like, are you really toxic? And like, no, but that's just what I see all the time. So, I guess I'm toxic. I'm like, well, no, that's like the shadow, one of the shadows of Scorpio, and it can go down that route, but you don't have to go down that route if you don't want to. And that's just something that I see is always very unfortunate, that a lot of folks who are in the astrology world, are more in like the trends or like the memes. So a lot of people are not really learning as much. And that's why for me, like a big part of my business and my purpose is to also create my own certification so I can teach people how to read charts from a way that is ethical, empowering, and elevated. Because I'm so tired of all of that trending astrology, you know, pardon, crap that I see on Instagram, on TikTok. I don't think that it serves us.
Mm-hmm. I'm right there with you. It just comes down to, again, too, it's a reflection too of the world in general that we live in, where sometimes the shadow is the easier thing, we'll say, to accept or to see, because the light might feel scarier, or it's like, oh, that doesn't feel right. When in reality, it's like, what's the block that's not letting you see that light that you need to work through to be able to get there? And it's so interesting that you bring up Scorpio. I was holding back, but I was like, I have a mom who's a Scorpio and a dad who's a Taurus. That's a very interesting combination. Um, and
Because
that's
the polarity.
exactly that polarity. And that polarity, when they get along, is beautiful. And when they don't, it's like, just don't be in the same room. But it's so interesting too that you bring up Scorpio, because Scorpio is, I have also a stellium Scorpio with my stellium Virgo. And the first time I heard that I had that, I was like, no way. And then when I really felt into it, I was like 100%. I was like, and the two of them together are basically just like cousins who are constantly what's the word that I'm looking for? Like partners in action kind of thing.
They're the partners in crime.
Exactly. Exactly. Trying not to do crime though.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
get what you're saying with that too, because I remember when I first found out about like signatures, like I have a strong Cancer signature in my chart, but Cancer sits in my eighth house. So I also have a very strong Plutonic signature. And, at first I was like, similar, where I was like, oh, but Scorpio and Pluto have all of these negative connotations along with the eighth house. I was like, I don't want to be connected with that. But as I got older and I started to learn more and dive in deeper, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see it. And I understand how to alchemize those shadows and turn it into light versus before where it was like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to be connected with that. And I was just like, I just want to be blind to it.
Yeah, exactly. And for myself in my business, I work a lot with coming back into our whole selves and coming back into the mind, the body, and the soul. And that's exactly it. It's like if you want to accept all of you, you have to accept all of you. And especially those parts where you're like, I don't really want to look at. Those are the ones that it's really that challenge to sit with. And once you do, just like the beautiful story that you shared as well, where there's that fear of I have to do something that's very uncomfortable. But once you do it and you sit in the fire and you end up on the other side of it, there's so much more available to you because of that work and that acceptance of working through that hurdle. So I love
Absolutely. I love that too, because I definitely agree. It's so beautiful to, look at those shadows and work with them. And I think that's why what was so beautiful about this book and this opportunity to be a part of it was the connection with a goddess. Because I feel that, unfortunately, again, with how we were saying, astrology gets, trendy and there's a lot of misinformation. I feel that similarly with the goddesses as well, too, where sometimes we just see things that are very trendy. Like I didn't know who Kuan Yin was. And when I found out who she was, I was blown because I was like, she is amazing. I wish other people talked about her more. But I think that's the beauty of this book that all of the women have different goddesses that they connect with. And I remember when I was reading it, there were some that I was like, I don't know who this is. Like, I need to go and look this one up because it sounds awesome and I want to learn more. And I think that's the beauty of working with these goddesses and all of these different energies. I remember reading, I believe it was Jessica's chapter on Artemis, and I didn't realize that that was the equivalent of Diana, the goddess of the hunt. So once I made that connection, I was like, I want to work with that energy too, especially as I'm trying to get more masculine structures in place to support me so I can flow in my feminine. But it's so beautiful how that inspiration just came from reading her chapter and learning about her connection with the goddess. And I think that's so much of the beauty and the magic that comes from these collaborative books with all of these different women's beautiful, amazing stories. Because maybe if you don't relate with my story, you might relate with someone else's story and vice versa. So it just gives so many beautiful opportunities to learn and to see you're not alone in these experiences.
Mhm. And just like you said, it opens up a whole new world to one, either learning about new goddesses or two, being able to see goddesses from a completely different perspective. I love that. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what your experience was like working with Radha's Publishing House?
Oh my goodness. I had such an amazing experience working with Radha's Publishing House. I had shared during one of the incubator calls about how, for me, English and like writing was one of the really hard subjects for me in school. I didn't learn English until I started elementary school. And in the community where I grew up, it was majority white. Everyone spoke English. I think it was just me and another little boy were the only Spanish speakers up until fourth grade. So I was pretty behind, struggled in school, writing, reading, grammar, all of that was not my favorite. It was my least favorite subject in school. I was more of a math girl because, numbers, you you either mess up and you figure out how to fix it and then you solve it. But, with writing and reading and all of that stuff, it's a little more subjective and it depends on how you interpret things. So that was one of my fears going in that, you know, I carried that limiting belief from childhood that I can't write. I'm not meant to be a writer. And when I found out that there's going to be incubators where we can meet and like share our medicine with each other, also receive feedback from each other on our chapters as things go. That made me feel so much more confident and like it was a possibility. And I remember when I submitted my chapter and receiving the feedback from Radha and receiving the feedback from the team then who edited and did everything to make sure that I was coming across the way that I wanted while still keeping true to my voice and my words. That meant so much to me, especially coming from that place of when I was young, I was that little girl who had the dreams of being a writer. Um, I wanted to do astrology since I was a kid, but I thought, well, I don't want to be on TV. I have no desire for that. That's not me. I'm more behind the scenes. And when I would read the horoscopes, I was like, I would love to do that, but I don't have the ability or talent to write. So I just, kind of pushed that aside and was like, I can't do that. So to come from that kind of space and that kind of thought, and to then move to, wow, like this team really supports me. They really believe in me and they're helping me become the best writer that I can be. That meant so much.
So powerfully said. And again, celebrating you for doing something and going through the what I like to call turning something from impossible to I am possible. And taking that moment with your inner self and especially your inner child who didn't necessarily believe in it. And now you have proof that one, not only are you a writer, but two, you have published writing out there within a beautiful book. And so I'm celebrating you on that. And I can also relate to you on that. For myself, I had a lot of, and still do have a lot of learning disabilities that I never thought I was going to be a writer. And to be able to have that, it's such a full circle within. And it comes back to, again, like the beautiful story that you shared about your confidence and your ability to elevate within yourself. This is another beautiful example of that, of how you took something and went, nope, I'm still doing it. So celebrating you on that.
Oh, thank you so much. Being a part of this book really felt like it was not just a gift for my adult self, but it felt like it was such a big gift for my inner child and to let her see, like, we did it. We are able to write, we're published, like, we are official. It's no longer a pipe dream, it's a fully actualized, real dream, and we are living it.
Oh, exactly. And how did it feel for your whole self to hold the book once you ended up receiving it?
Oh my goodness, it felt so amazing to actually have the book and to also hear from friends who purchased the book when we were doing the promotion and to have them hear my story. That meant so much to me because it's out there and I feel like our stories are what carry us and will continue to make an impact. And that's why I was so, as I said earlier, I'm so grateful to be a part of this book series and with all of these amazing women who are sharing their stories, sharing their connections with the goddess, because I feel like this is going to be something that will continue on and be out there for people, even like once I'm dead. Like that book will still be out there and people will still be impacted by my story, by my writing, by my connection, and that of the other women. Like this is our legacy, and we're leaving it behind for others so they can have those beautiful, divine feminine awakenings and connect with the goddess and go back to, being those amazing cyclical beings that we used to be with the red tents, following the moons and working with our cycles.
So beautiful. I'm loving this conversation.
Same.
It's been great so far. Um, how would you describe working with Radha's Publishing House in one word?
Oh my goodness, one word. Definitely, I'm feeling like elevated comes up because it is such an elevated experience. I was not expecting the level of support and care that Radha and her team put into working with us and making everything happen behind the scenes, the level of kindness, how everyone is so involved, so encouraging. it is the most elevated experience that I have seen for people who offer these kinds of collaborative book options, because I have seen other ones and I have been invited to other opportunities, and I just never felt the call or fully inspired to do so. But when I saw it and I saw like the opportunity from Radha, I met with her. I went to one of the little Zooms that Radha was holding for people who were interested and just wanted to get more information. And for me, like it just felt like this is such an elevated experience, and it is gonna also help me elevate too. And I feel like it definitely did.
From what you've shared so far in this, absolutely. That's a really beautifully picked word for what it is like to work with Radha's Publishing House, because it definitely is a very elevating experience. And then at the same time, like you said, there's so much support that you don't necessarily find in other spaces. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. What would you say is one gift of wisdom that you can offer our viewers before we end our call?
Hmm. I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give to ourselves, especially as we're trying to connect more with ourselves, is to really listen to those intuitive nudges that we're getting and pay attention to them. I know that it can feel hard to do so when you're starting out because you're not used to hearing that voice, to feeling those nudges, but just quiet down and really listen because it is guiding you where you need to go. Because if I didn't listen to my intuition, I would not have made the decision to leave behind the world of school counseling. I would not have made the decision to be a part of this book and achieve a childhood dream. And I would not have made the decision to run a business. And I can't imagine my life without these things.
Thank you so much for sharing. And that sounded, I would say it had a little bit of a hint of Taurus wisdom in there.
Yes, the embodiment piece.
Yeah, the embodiment and the slow down piece.
Yes,
The coming back to quality over quantity as well, which is a really big key thing in Taurus energy.
absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, for your beautiful shares, and for sharing everything that you did with our viewers. Thank you for your bravery and also celebrating you for everything that you have accomplished so far on your journey. And I look forward to seeing everything else that you accomplish on your journey ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I've had such an amazing time getting to chat with you and share and talk more about my chapter and my own experiences. It's always so absolutely healing and liberating to get to share your voice.
Absolutely. And is there any last little things that your voice wants to share before we end?
Um, if you desire to connect with me on Instagram, that's where I hang out most of the time. And I am there at I am Yvonne Irene. And I love connecting with you guys and sharing astrology wisdom, sharing spirituality with you all. So I hope that we can all continue our journeys together and support each other throughout the way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. And for our viewers, please take the time to go check out Yvonne and have a beautiful rest of your day. Keep on shining so brightly. We've got this.